Hello everyone, welcome to the Anglийский podcast. This podcast is for native Russian speakers who are learning English. But don't worry if your native language is not Russian, that's okay. You can still learn a lot from this podcast. But this podcast is mainly for people whose level is at a B1 to B2 level of English. But if your level is higher, that's okay. You will still learn a lot from this podcast. And if your level is lower, that's also okay. But it might be a little bit difficult for you if you are a complete beginner of English. So make sure you watch this podcast or listen to this podcast until the end, because there will be a lot of useful words related to today's topic in today's podcast. And also, if you are watching this podcast, you can see on the screen all the difficult words that come up throughout the podcast. You can see the words with the translations. But don't worry if you're not watching the podcast, that's okay. You can listen to this podcast if you're driving, or if you're taking a shower or having a walk around town, that's okay. You can watch or listen to this podcast. So today's topic is going to be salaries in England, America, and Russia. If you guys don't know me, that's okay. My name is Ben. Hello, welcome to the show. And I come from London, England, but right now I live in Russia, in Novosibirsk, which is in Siberia, which is a very cold place, very far away from London, England. And I have lived, of course, in Russia, in London, and I have lived in Las Vegas in America. And for a short while, I lived in California, in Los Angeles. And in all of these places, I have had some jobs in entry-level positions. Entry-level means jobs that are not very senior. It means jobs that are jobs for people starting a career. So I have worked in the hotel industry, I have worked as a courier, and now, as you can see, I am an English tutor. So I have experience working in a few industries. Also, I forgot to mention I have worked as a bicycle mechanic, but not for a very long time. So salaries. Well, before we get started, I need to say that salaries are basically the same in all countries. What do I mean the same? Well, of course, people in America earn more money than people in Russia. But what I mean is that the salary you get, the money you get every month from your employer, allows you to buy the same kind of things in all three countries. But what the real question is how much, not how much your salary is, but what can you do with the salary, and what other factors should you be considering when comparing different countries. I live in Russia, as I have mentioned, and of course I think Russia is a great place to live for my particular profession, but it depends on your profession, it depends what you do. Different countries provide different conditions for different people. But in my opinion, working in an entry-level position is best in Russia. If you are in Russia, it's better for people who are starting their careers, and I will explain why in this podcast. Let's start with England. That's where I am originally from. So like I mentioned, I have worked in the hotel industry in England, and the jobs I did in the hotel included working as a luggage porter and as a concierge. A luggage porter is someone who helps bring luggage to guests' rooms. So guests arrive at the hotel, and I help take their luggage, their bags, up to their rooms. That was my job, and I did this around 2015, 2016. And this job does not pay very well, and it is usually you usually have to work 12-hour shifts. So I worked 4 shifts So 4 days a week, 12-hour shifts. So that was 48 hours a week. And my salary was something around £18,500 per year. Don't forget, in England and America, salaries are listed as annual salaries. Annual means per year. In Russia, salaries are usually listed as monthly salaries. So in Russia, you see how much you earn in 1 month. In America and England, you see how much you earn in 1 year. If you are on a recruitment website or a job listing website, a website where you can see different jobs. You can see monthly salaries in Russia and annual salaries in England or America. So £18,500 a year in the UK, that's before tax. By the way, most jobs in the UK and America are listed as before tax, whereas in Russia, I have seen a mix. I have seen some people listing jobs before tax and some jobs listing jobs as after tax. So you get a big variety in Russia. But coming back to my job in England, working as a luggage porter, that was a fun job. I met a lot of interesting people, and the wage was not very good. The salary was not very good, but I earned enough to pay for a roof over my head. But now £18,500 in 2024 is definitely not enough to live in London. You would live in very squalid conditions. Squalid means not very good, terrible conditions. You would live in a terrible room in a very bad part of town if you earned that kind of money. But back in 2016, it was also a very, very low salary, but still you could just about get by. To get by means to survive in a financial sense. So I worked as a luggage porter and as a concierge. When I was a concierge, my salary was raised a little bit. I got a raise, which means that I got more money. I got a raise when I became a concierge. A concierge, they have to know everything about the city, and they help guests with making reservations in restaurants or with other things. For instance, giving directions or telling guests what they could do, what they could see, what they could visit. So I got a raise and my salary became, I think it was £20,000. So not a huge raise, but I still got a raise. And £20,000 works out to be around £1,400 a month after tax. So each month I got around £1,400. So I was living in a flat in Streatham. So Streatham is in South London, and I shared the flat with someone. And usually if I had not been sharing the flat with someone, I would have been paying around £1,000 a month. So I earned £1,400 a month, but the one-bedroom apartment, the one-bedroom flat, cost around £1,000 a month. So it would be impossible to rent a one-bedroom apartment on that salary. So I paid £500 a month because we split the rent in half. So I paid £500 a month. So 1,400 minus 500 gives you £900. So I had £900 after paying my rent. But then again, you have to pay council tax and other things in the UK. Council tax is a tax you have to pay to your local government to help take away your rubbish and do other things like clean the streets. So I had about £800 after paying my bills every month. So £800 in London, that's not much money. £800 or £200 a week, it goes away. You spend it very quickly, let's say. So you need to earn a lot of money if you're living in London. The other problem with London is that it's hard to find cheap apartments. It's hard to find cheap places to live. There is so much competition for apartments. It's ridiculous. And the rent prices go up every year. So you always have to worry about that. Moving on to America, I mentioned I live in Las Vegas, and I also worked in a hotel in Las Vegas. And there, my annual salary was $33,000 per year. So per month, I took home around $3,000 every month. But I rented a one-bedroom apartment in a really, really bad part of town, and that was $800 per month. So it was a better situation than in London, but nonetheless, it was a very dangerous neighborhood, and there's other things you have to consider when living in America. In England, you don't have to worry about healthcare. If you break your leg, there's no problem. I also forgot to mention I worked as a bicycle courier in London, and that was quite a dangerous job because you could get into a traffic accident really easily. And luckily, if you live in the UK, if you break your leg, you don't have to worry about it. An ambulance comes and takes you to the hospital, and you don't have to pay anything. In America, that's not true. It's not the case in America. In America, if an ambulance gets called, then you have to spend something like $1,000 to $3,000 just for the ambulance, and then you have to pay thousands of dollars in other medical costs. So you need medical insurance in America. If you don't have medical insurance, then it's really you're in a very dangerous situation. So in America, sure, I got $3,000 a month, $800 and something dollars I spent on my apartment. Las Vegas is a very hot place. The temperatures get to around 45 to 48 degrees Celsius, and you need air conditioning. And air conditioning can be really expensive. I just used a fan because it was too expensive. I just used a normal fan, but air conditioning can be around $400, if not more, dollars per month. I know if you have a house, it can be over $1,000 a month. So I saved a lot of money by using a fan, but 45 degrees Celsius is very, very hot, and a fan is not always enough to keep you cool in that weather. There are so many expenses in America. So health insurance. So at the first year of living in America, I did not have any health insurance. And luckily nothing happened to me. But then I realized you need health insurance in America. So I decided to take out a health insurance plan, and it cost me around $150 per month. But it was still terrible because if anything had happened to me, if I had to go and see the doctor, I would still have to pay a lot of money. So the health insurance plan I had covered me up until $25,000. So if anything happened to me and it cost less than $25,000, then the health insurance would not pay for me. I would have to pay the doctor. But if I had a big accident and I had to pay $100,000, then the health insurance policy would pay everything after $25,000. But before, up until $25,000, I would have to foot the bill myself. To foot the bill means to pay the bill. So it's still very scary when you're speaking about healthcare in America. But in England, yeah, you don't have to worry about that. And in Russia, you don't have to worry about that either. But in America, yeah, it's very expensive, and other things are way more expensive than they are in the UK or in Russia. Of course, they're much more expensive than in Russia. Internet, I had the cheapest internet plan. It was $60 a month, and it was not very good internet. In England, I paid £18 a month, which is way less. And in Russia, I pay nothing compared to that. I pay per month. I have a very high speed package. I pay about $8 a month. is so cheap compared to America. But you also have to consider the ratio of your salary compared to your expenses. The ratio means how much you get and how much you spend. So, of course, in America, you earn about 6 times or 5 times more than you earn in Russia. I believe for entry-level salaries in America, entry-level salaries are about $2,500 per month. Usually that's like the very bottom salary you would get in America, $2,500 per month. In Russia, you would get something like $400 to $500 per month, maybe less, maybe more. If you go around Russia, I live in Novosibirsk, so it's not Moscow. The salaries here are much lower than they are in Moscow. But I know supermarkets pay anything between 35 up to 55,000 rubles per month. So that's around $350 to $550 per month. So in America, the entry-level salaries are about $2,500 per month for a full-time job. So in America, people earn around 5 times more than people do in Russia. So $8 for internet compared to $60 per internet. Well, still, it's much better in Russia because $60 was for the cheapest package, for the low-speed cheap package, whereas in Russia, $8 is for the high-speed package. And if you times 8 times 5, so 8 times 5 gives you 40. So it's much better in Russia. It's much better value for money in Russia when it comes to the internet and other bills. So coming back to America, yeah, I worked in a hotel. I was a receptionist and I worked shifts that were, I worked shifts at different hours. I worked night shifts, day shifts, morning shifts. I was an on-call worker. On-call means that your employer, your boss, can call you at any time and tell you to come to work at any time. So it was not a very nice schedule that I had. So I was a full-time on-call worker. But the good thing about working in Las Vegas is that it's in Nevada, and in Nevada there is no state income tax, which is great. Because in other states you have state income tax. So I got to keep more money. But I believe the general income tax rate was something like, because I had to pay federal tax. 1 second. Let me check out the rate. Federal income tax rate. It is something like 10 to 12% if you are earning under a certain amount of money. So let me just double check over here. Income tax rates. So 10% up to $11,000, and after $11,000, the income tax rate was 12%. So I believe that's a bit lower than Russia's income tax rate, which I believe is 13%. So that was good. I got to keep some extra money in America. But if you earn over $47,000, then your income tax rate is at 22%. So that's considerably more. But right now, I'm working in Russia. I am a freelancer. I do not have an employer. So my tax rate is much lower than it is in America. I pay 6% tax, which is amazing. That's so cheap. It's so good. In America, self-employment tax, let me double check. Self-employment tax, I believe it's like 15% if I'm not mistaken. Self-employment tax, USA. Yeah, it's 15.3%, I believe. Yeah, so it's more. There's more tax in America. Let's see how much it is in the UK. In the UK, self-employment tax comes out to be around 9% on profits over £12,000, £12,570, I believe. So in Russia, it's great if you are a freelance worker because I pay 6% in tax, but I could pay 4% if I were a Russian citizen. But because I'm not a Russian citizen, I have to pay 6%. But I'm not complaining because 6% is a really low tax rate, and I have absolutely no problem with that. So in Russia, I am a freelance worker, as I said, but previously I worked at a language school, and you pay about 13% in tax at a language school. But if you work in an entry-level position in Russia, you can earn anything between, outside of Moscow I'm talking about, you can earn anything between 30 to 50,000 rubles per month. That's for entry-level position. Maybe less, maybe 20,000 to 45,000 rubles for entry-level positions. I know at my local supermarket, which is called Yarche. Yarche is a chain of supermarkets in Novosibirsk. They pay people around 55,000 rubles per month to work full-time at a supermarket. And I know Magnit pays around 35 to 40,000 rubles for full-time supermarket workers. And at KFC, it's something like 55,000 rubles per month if you work full-time. That's what I've seen advertised. So basically, you will earn anything between, 25 to 55,000 rubles per month. So really, the ratio between your salary and your monthly expenses is kind of the same in England, America, and Russia. But the real thing that makes the difference is that in Russia, it's really easy to find an apartment, which is great. You don't have to worry about finding a cheap place to live in Russia. At least outside of Moscow and St. Petersburg, it's quite easy to find a good place to live. I have a friend who said he looked at an apartment and he didn't like the apartment, and after a week he left the apartment. You could not do that in England or America. In England or America, you have to sign a contract for at least 6 months to 1 year, and there's so much paperwork, and the landlords want to know everything about you, and it's quite complicated renting an apartment in England and America. And what's more is in America, you have to have a good credit score. So if you don't have a good credit score, then if you rent an apartment, you have to pay a few months up front, typically 6 months up front if you don't have a good credit score, or you need to show that you are employed. In Russia, it's much easier. If you can rent apartments without contracts sometimes, and it's much more flexible in Russia. So really, all three countries, in terms of your salary, it's kind of the same story in terms of the ratio between your salary and your monthly expenses. But what makes Russia the best country, in my opinion, is that you can easily find a place to live. In England and America, it's like a horrible race to find a great place to live, or to find a not so good place to live. There is so much competition when it comes to finding a good apartment. In Russia, outside of Moscow and St. Petersburg, you don't have that problem. So if you guys have any questions about English, or if you want to practice your English writing skills, I definitely suggest you use the comment section of this video to practice your English writing skills. And if you want to subscribe to the channel, I definitely suggest you do so. You can get a lot of useful English language learning content if you subscribe. And of course, press the like button if you're on YouTube listening to this. It would really help me out. So thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I hope to see you again next time. And bye for now.